Welcome back to Rugby on 216. Now, there is a revolution of rugby in the Eastern Cape with the incredible Mzwandile Mali tournament. It's an amazing story that we want to share with you today. And to help me do that, I'm joined by Lincoln Mali of the Lincoln Mali Foundation that's responsible for putting on the Mzwandile Mali tournament. Lincoln, welcome to Rugby on 216.
Thank you so much. Thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk about township and village school rugby.
Yeah, I think it's a story that is so amazing, and it's coming off, I think, the legacy of your father, Mzwandile Mali. So talk to us a little bit about how the tournaments came about, why the need was identified for this tournament, and where it all began.
I come from a very strong rugby family. Rugby in the townships in the Eastern Cape has been played for more than 150 years. My own father's club, the Orientals, were formed in 1894. So I grew up knowing this history, playing the game, but over the last 15 years or so, the rugby was dying in our schools. There was no rugby being played in schools and villages and schools and townships. And I thought, let me do something about it. So I started this rugby tournament with 8 schools. And today, we're talking about 54 schools.
Wow, that's amazing. And that growth, to get schools involved from all across the Eastern Cape. Talk to us a little bit about the format. Those 54 schools that are involved are coming from towns across the Eastern Cape, and they all culminate in finals, which have just happened now.
Yeah, it's an amazing knockout system. So you've got schools in Queenstown, Alliesford, Beaufort, Case Kamahawk, Grahamstown, Alexandria, and Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha. And a lot of this is done by volunteers who also saw the need to revive school rugby. But more importantly, it's now been driven by the players themselves who've seen in super sports schools what happened. They've seen the tours and they're like, I want to be part of that. So schools have been competing, and really it's been great competition.
And then they go to the one big finals weekend, which, like I said, has just happened. Tell us about the winners, because there's a very special story there coming from Mzwandile, which is obviously where Sia comes from, Sia Khaleesi, our captain, and they've won for the 5th year in a row.
Yeah, so last year the finals were between Mzwandile and Tubalete from Fort Beaufort. And the finals again were between Mzwandile and Tubalete. And Mzwandile won again, and they were winning this for the 5th time in a row. I mean, it's an incredible story because in many ways, the Zwide area has produced so many great players. And so that school continues to produce great players, and they play amazing rugby. So great spectacle, full stadium at the Isaac Wilson Stadium. The community just came out to the township to support great rugby.
Wow, it's I'm literally goosebumps, and there's a reason I also want to talk about the school, because the tournament is a stepping stone for a lot of these players. They're going to schools in the township, they're playing this great rugby, and then they can get picked up by schools that can help take them to the next level. And one such player last year who made it all the way to the SA Under-18 squad, starting in the Mzwandile Mali tournament, was Bator Hlekani. So talk to us a little bit about that system and picking up players.
Yeah, there are great players in these schools and amazing coaches. So Bato came out of that system of Mzwandile under Coach Xolani Grootboom, who's been coaching there for 10 years, and they've been able to produce that players, and so he was able to go to Graham College. There's another player they'll be announcing probably next week who's been identified from Mzwandile, who's made it to Graham College. So again, it enables these schools to be feeders, but also these schools to grow. So it's not them just producing players for other schools, but they are also doing well. And also other schools from primary and other schools from other areas, players say, I want to play for Mzwandile, I want to play for Tubalete. So we want to encourage that. And a lot of this has been seen through players playing with super sports schools. It's also amazing that at Dale College Open Day, some of the schools that we've seen on our tournament were playing in the open day at Dale College. Tubalete and Steve Twete from Case Kamahawk were playing in the Dale College yesterday. So there's a sports revolution going on. Gray, PE has also invited some of the schools to go and play their third, sometimes their seconds. And so you start to see this integration of rugby from the grassroots and kids starting to compete with one another.
And you say it's a revolution in the Eastern Cape, and like you say, these schools playing against the slightly more established schools, and this is something that wouldn't have happened before the tournament, and picking up players and talent which we would have missed. Most of them would have fallen through the net, wouldn't have been picked up before. And I think it's obviously mainly and largely due to your tournaments, and then you say also that these players are being seen on SuperSport Schools. So it's an amazing tournament, and it doesn't just end when the tournament ends.
Yes.
Last year there was a Mzwandile Select 15 chosen, and they toured England.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because that must have been such an amazing experience.
Again, it was an amazing thing. At the end of the World Cup in Japan, I wrote an article talking about the future of the Springbok and saying there's so much talent in townships and villages that is untapped.
Yeah.
A friend of mine I worked with was a coach at Seven Oaks Rugby Football Club, and he saw this and he was so emotional because South Africa had won, but he was in England and said, "What can we do?" And he said, "Why don't you bring out a squad to England?" I'm like, "How are we going to do that?" So I started fundraising to get the boys there. He started fundraising, for the boys when they are there. And Seven Oaks Rugby Football Club hosted us, and our boys played a game against the Seven Oaks Juniors, and the entire place was packed. And the boys played amazing rugby and won that game. Then they went to visit Sutton Balance, which is a very upmarket school. Then they went to visit Tonbridge, but the highlight was to play against Brighton College. At Brighton College, watched by Marcus Smith. What a game.
Wow.
We lost just by like 3 points.
Wow.
And it was a tri-fest. And at the end of the game, for Marcus Smith to choose the man of the tournament, being a young man called Babale Prince, I was our number 10, was just something that, I can just dream about. And it's the same boy who was man of the tournament in our tournament in 2024, is also man of the tournament in 2025. So these things enable more people to see that there's talent. And out of that, rugby tournaments here locally have now seen that our boys can compete in those rugby tournaments. But it started by them watching SuperSports cover our boys in the UK.
And talking about that, the teams, the more established rugby schools, the stronger rugby schools around the country that when we think of rugby we hear about all the time, are now inviting schools from Mzwandile tournament and the Select 15 from the tournament that gets chosen at the end to play at their tournaments. So I know that there's a team off to Noordsite, down in the Western Cape at Paul Roos, and then also at Grey's Festival. So tell us about that, because the more these teams are involved in rugby in South Africa, and not just in the tournament. Obviously, that tournament's the amazing springboard, but it's creating more hype and interest around Eastern Cape schools.
Absolutely. I went to go and speak to Slapchips, who runs the North Saint, and said to him, "This is what the idea we have." And he said, "Lincoln, what's the quality of these boys?" I said, "I can only show you when they play on SuperSport." And suddenly when they started playing, and then they played in England, he called me and says, "You are in our tournament." So that first team, the Mzwandile Mali 15, will play at the North Saint tournament. We're very excited about that. Then we also got invited by Ferna to a Grey PE. So now we're able to put 2 squads, because we had more than 1,200 boys. So to be able to pick 46 boys was easy, because there is good depth and good talent. And now those boys will be exposed to those tournaments, and now yearn to be invited to those tournaments and those schools. And that's how we grow the game. I mean, it's amazing when we were in England to talk to English schoolboys and ask them who are their rugby heroes. Like 90% of the players they mentioned were South African Springboks. That shows how this game in this country has grown. But we're just scratching the surface, because you want the broadest and the deepest depth of players from all communities, and Russ's dream will come true.
I think I've had goosebumps this entire episode, because we talk so often about the untapped potential of the players in the Eastern Cape, and what you're doing is tapping into that potential, putting them onto a world stage, and just really taking Eastern Cape School Rugby to the next level. So anything you want to add just as we wrap up about going forward?
Really to thank, Super Sports School, Calvin Watt, for seeing the vision and putting these kids on show. And these kids have responded. Atlas Foundation, based in the UK, who supported us, we put these kids in camps, give them a lot of training at the Nelson Mandela University high performance area, so that when they go to these games, they are prepared psychologically, mentally, and in terms of the sport. And then Standard Bank, who's been our partners with the Lincoln Mandela Foundation, but most importantly, the boys. Just the way 1,200 boys in 54 schools across about 7-8 towns have played the game, really put it on the map. And I just hope that the schools can continue to play beyond the tournament. The tournament is a good feeder, but they've got to play regularly in order for them to improve. And for clubs in those areas to embrace these boys. I played schools rugby and I played for a club. There's always a good link when you're playing for a club and you play for a school, so that if the schools are strong, clubs will be strong. Clubs are strong, provinces will be strong. Provinces are strong, the Springboks will be strong.
Well, all I can say at the end of this is thank you for the amazing work you're doing for rugby and for South Africa. It is an amazing story, and I'm so glad that you got to tell it here on Rugby on 2 and 6, so thank you for that.
Brilliant.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will be wrapping up the show, talking about some of the changes to the laws for the community rugby season, and we'll also play the impossible truth. I can't wait to see the Mzwandile Mali Select 15 at Noord State. We're going to take a quick break. I'll see you in a bit.